The mansion shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, their reflections scattering across marble floors polished to a mirror's perfection. Outside, the city pulsed with the noise of traffic and ambition, but inside the tall gates of the estate, another world unfolded, one of music, money, and power. Politicians, businessmen, and artists moved from corner to corner, raising glasses of red wine and toasts that sounded rehearsed, laughing at conversations laced with pride and competition. The evening had the rhythm of opulence. Soft violinists played near the staircase, servants glided across the hall carrying trays stacked with golden-rimmed glasses, and the very air seemed heavy with perfume and privilege. Among this sea of luxury, an unnoticed shadow slipped in through the servants' entrance. A young girl, barely 8 years old, clung tightly to her mother's hand. Her mother wore the crisp uniform of a waitress, a white apron tied over a black dress. She had begged her employer to let her bring the child tonight. There was no one to leave her with, and she could not risk losing the job. The man, wealthy and proud, allowed it only because he enjoyed reminding the poor of their place. The girl did not belong in this palace of chandeliers and wine. Her clothes were plain, her shoes worn, her eyes wide and restless. Hunger had carved itself into her face, the kind that doesn't simply whisper but growls through the stomach. She said nothing as she entered. She didn't have to. The guests barely noticed her, except to glance with irritation at the intrusion of poverty into their perfect scene. To them she was invisible, at best a distraction, at worst an embarrassment. But while the others drowned themselves in conversations of politics and profit, the girl's gaze fixed on something else entirely. In the center of the great room stood a piano. It was not just any piano but a grand masterpiece, its black lacquered surface shining, its ivory keys gleaming under the chandelier light. For the girl, that piano was not an object of decoration. It was alive. It breathed, it called to her, it whispered stories only she could hear. She stood silently behind the doorframe, unable to look away, as if the instrument had pulled her into its orbit. Her stomach growled again, louder this time. The aroma of roasted meats, delicate pastries, and rich sauces swirled around the hall. Every laugh from the guests seemed to mock her hunger. Her mother glanced at her from across the room, a tray balanced carefully in her hands, eyes heavy with guilt. She wished she could take one piece of bread, one grape, one crumb from the golden platters, but fear chained her in silence. Fear of the employer who would dismiss her without mercy if she broke the rules. Fear of poverty waiting outside if she lost this last fragile job. The girl pressed her small hands against her stomach, trying to quiet the hunger. She whispered to herself as if reciting a secret promise. If I can play, maybe they will feed me. Her words vanished under the roar of laughter from the hall. Minutes passed, then hours stretched. She kept staring at the piano, and the piano in its quiet way kept staring back. She remembered nights when her father, before the sickness, before the silence of death, would place her on his lap in their small room. The old keyboard they had was broken, missing notes, cracked at the edges. But her father's hands guided hers gently across the surviving keys, teaching her not only sound but soul. He used to whisper, "Music carries truth no one can steal." That truth still lived in her, even if the keyboard was gone, even if the man who taught her was gone. The voices in the hall grew louder. The owner of the mansion, a gray-haired millionaire with a taste for both music and cruelty, sat proudly in the center. He was known for boasting about his skill on the keys, enjoying how people clapped more for his money than for his music. He saw himself as a master of both wealth and art, a man who could buy applause as easily as he bought wine. And then, without planning, without hesitation, the girl moved. She took a deep breath, stepped out from behind the door, and walked straight toward the piano. Her small frame cut across the hall like a fragile flame in a storm. The murmurs began almost instantly. Guests lowered their glasses to watch. Some chuckled, already sensing comedy. A few whispered cruel remarks. Who let the servant's child in? She'll break the piano with her dirty hands. The girl stopped at the piano bench. Her voice was soft but steady. Can I play in exchange for food? The room erupted. Laughter thundered from every side, spilling like wine over the marble. Some clapped mockingly, others shook their heads in disbelief. One man muttered, "Does she think this is a circus?" Her mother rushed forward, face burning with shame, but before she could reach her, the millionaire raised a hand. His smile was sharp, cruel. "Play for food," he said, his voice heavy with mockery. "Nothing is given for free in this house. But if you can truly surprise me, if you make me speechless, I'll give you more than food. I'll make you my daughter." The guests laughed harder, taking it as a cruel joke, a game to break the monotony of the evening. But the girl did not laugh. She looked at the man with steady eyes, unblinking, unafraid. Then she climbed onto the bench, her legs too short to reach the floor, and placed her small hands on the ivory keys. The room fell into a tense silence. Some leaned forward, eager to watch a disaster. Others smirked, expecting broken notes. Her mother stood frozen, torn between pride and terror. The millionaire leaned back, arms crossed, smiling confidently. To him this was entertainment, nothing more. And then the girl pressed the first key. The first sound rose like a drop of water falling into silence. A single note, clear and unwavering, cut through the heavy air of the hall. It was not clumsy, not hesitant, it was pure. Her small fingers moved to the next, then another, and within seconds the piano was no longer furniture but a vessel pouring out something sacred. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago broke into fragments, replaced by startled silence. Guests tilted their heads. Smirks fell from faces. A ripple of unease traveled across the hall as the notes formed not a childish song, but something rich, layered, impossibly mature. This was no nursery rhyme. No clumsy imitation. It was music that carried weight, sorrow, and beauty. Each chord seemed to open a door inside the listeners, doors they had locked long ago. The millionaire, seated at the center, shifted uncomfortably. His smile faltered. He had expected noise, chaos, an excuse to humiliate the girl further. Instead, he found himself leaning forward, eyes narrowing, heart thudding. Something in the melody was familiar, achingly so. The girl's eyes were closed, her face calm, as though the piano itself guided her hands. She did not seek applause. She did not seek approval. She played because hunger demanded it, because memory demanded it, because silence had become unbearable. Her fingers danced with a precision that no child should possess, each movement echoing years of secret practice, of broken keyboards, of lessons whispered by a father long gone. At the far side of the hall, her mother pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. She remembered those nights, sitting on a wooden stool while her husband guided their daughter's hands. She remembered his words, "Even if I leave, she will carry my voice." Tears blurred her vision, but pride held her still. This was no accident. This was destiny taking shape in front of strangers who had laughed at her child's hunger. The guests exchanged glances. "Impossible," one whispered. "Where did she learn this?" Another muttered, "She's faking it. No child can play like that." But no one could look away. Even the servants carrying trays froze at the edges of the room, eyes wide, forgetting their duties. The melody grew. It was no longer delicate but bold, commanding, weaving between light and shadow. Each note was like a confession, a cry, a revelation. The sound filled every corner of the room, crawling into the hearts of even the most arrogant men. For the first time that evening, there was no talk of politics, no boasting of business. There was only music. The millionaire's mind reeled. He recognized this piece, every chord, every pause, every subtle touch. Decades ago in his youth he had attended a concert. The pianist who played that night had been unlike any other, a man whose name still carried reverence among musicians. That night had changed the millionaire's life, teaching him that music was not entertainment but truth. That man had died years ago, yet the melody unfolding now was the same. It was impossible and yet undeniable. Sweat beaded at the millionaire's temple. His mocking laughter had vanished. His jaw tightened, his hands gripped the arms of his chair. His chest rose and fell faster. He was not just listening, he was reliving. Whispers turned into gasps as the audience began to understand. One guest muttered, "I heard this piece once, it belongs to..." His voice trailed off, unable to say the name. The girl's fingers never faltered. She played as though guided by something greater than herself. She was too young to know of pride, too hungry to think of fear. Every note was survival, every chord a plea for dignity. Her mother's eyes blurred with tears. She saw her husband in her daughter's small body. She heard his voice in the sound. For her, this was not only music, it was resurrection. The millionaire leaned forward, trembling. The sound was too exact, too alive. Memories came flooding back. A dimly lit hall, a pianist with fire in his soul, the confession whispered over a drink, "The only thing I fear is leaving my daughter alone in the world." His heart slammed in his chest. His mind screamed what his pride refused to say. Could this child be? The girl's music climbed higher, swelling with emotion. Her thin shoulders shook as she pressed harder into the keys, pouring every ounce of hunger, loss, and hope into the song. The air grew heavy, thick with awe. The once mocking guests now sat in reverent silence. No one laughed. No one dared move. Some felt tears sting their eyes, though they could not explain why. They had come for wine and gossip, yet here they were, being broken open by the soul of a child. The millionaire could no longer hide his trembling. His mockery had turned to reverence, his arrogance to fear. The music stripped him bare, exposing memories he thought buried. It was the same music, the same soul, the same fire he had once admired. And then, like thunder following lightning, recognition struck. The girl was not just a servant's child. She was the daughter of that man. The revelation cracked through him like a storm. He felt the weight of his own cruelty, the mockery, the test, the hunger. Shame coiled inside him as he realized he had nearly humiliated the living echo of the one man who had once defined his love for music. The girl's music soared one last time, then fell gently into silence. Her fingers lifted from the keys, her chest rose and fell with exhaustion, and her eyes opened. She looked not at the guests, not at her mother, but directly at the millionaire. There was no fear in her gaze. No shame. Only dignity. The hall remained silent. No applause, no movement. Just the echo of truth ringing in the air. The millionaire rose to his feet. His wine glass slipped from the table and shattered across the marble floor. Still no one dared breathe. He took a step forward, then another, until he stood before the girl. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Her reply was simple, steady, and devastating. "My father taught me before he died." The words struck the millionaire like a hammer to his chest. "My father taught me before he died." The hall remained so silent that even the faint crackle of the chandelier lamps could be heard. Every guest's gaze darted between the girl, her mother, and the trembling man who stood before them. The laughter, arrogance, and superiority that had defined the night had been silenced, replaced by the heavy presence of truth. The girl sat still on the piano bench, her small hands folded gently on her lap. She was calm, as though her answer had explained everything. To her, it had. She did not see the weight her words carried. She did not see the storm unraveling inside the man who had mocked her minutes earlier. The millionaire's lips parted, but no words came. His throat burned, his chest tightened. Memories swarmed him like ghosts he could not escape. He saw the concert hall again decades past. He saw the pianist, tall, passionate, his music thunderous yet tender, bending over the keys with the same intensity this child had just shown. He remembered approaching him after the performance, his voice trembling with admiration. "You've changed the way I see music," he had said. The pianist, sweat shining on his brow, had smiled softly. "Music is not notes. It's the soul speaking in a language no one can counterfeit." And then later that night, in the privacy of a bar filled with smoke and whispers, the pianist had confessed his one fear, leaving his daughter unprotected. The millionaire swallowed hard. Now, staring into the face of this fragile girl with eyes too deep for her age, he knew that fear had become reality. His voice finally broke through, hoarse, unsteady. "What was your father's name?" The girl opened her mouth, but before she could answer, her mother stepped forward. Her tray rattled in her trembling hands as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but her words carried the weight of years of silence. "He was my husband," she said. "A pianist who gave everything to music. He died leaving only his scores and his daughter's talent behind. She plays every night on a broken keyboard because it's the only piece of him we still have." Gasps spread through the hall. The guests shifted uncomfortably, ashamed of their earlier laughter. A few lowered their eyes, unwilling to face the truth of what they had mocked. They had seen a hungry girl and judged her unworthy, blind to the legacy beating in her veins. The millionaire's knees weakened. He staggered slightly, catching himself on the edge of the piano. His breath came uneven, as though every note she had played still echoed inside him. He whispered the name, one he had not spoken in years, one he had carved into his memory as a monument of music. Her mother nodded. Yes, that was his name. The revelation crashed through the hall like thunder. The girl's father was not just a pianist. He had been the pianist, the man who had once defined an era, who had shaped the millionaire's own love for music. And now, his daughter, dressed in rags and mocked for her hunger, had resurrected that voice before their very eyes. The millionaire sank to his knees in front of the child. His hands trembled as he reached for hers, his voice breaking under the weight of shame and awe. "You didn't just surprise me, child. You returned something I thought was lost forever. I swore I would keep my word, and I will. From this moment forward, you are my daughter." The hall erupted, not in laughter, not in polite applause, but in something rawer, deeper. Guests clapped instinctively, some with tears in their eyes. It was not a performance they applauded, but a revelation, a redemption, a reminder that dignity cannot be crushed by poverty. The girl's eyes widened. For the first time that evening, her composure broke. She looked at her mother, uncertain, overwhelmed. Her mother dropped the tray, metal clattering against marble, and covered her face with both hands. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude poured out of her in sobs she could no longer contain. The millionaire stood again, towering over the girl with a reverence that humbled even him. He turned to the servants and barked an order, his voice trembling but firm. "Bring food. Not on a tray. On the main table. Tonight she eats with honor." The servants rushed to obey, their own eyes glistening as they carried platters of steaming food to the long dining table. The girl hesitated, still uncertain if this miracle was real. Her mother took her hand and guided her gently, as though afraid she would vanish if she let go. The girl sat at the grand table, plates of delicacies set before her. For a moment she simply stared, overwhelmed by the abundance. Then, with trembling hands, she picked up a piece of bread. Tears welled in her eyes as she bit into it, the simple act of eating now heavy with meaning. The millionaire sat beside her, his gaze never leaving her. To him, every bite was sacred, every movement a confirmation that destiny had brought her into his home. He had wealth, power, prestige, but until this moment he had not had purpose. Now, in this fragile girl he found it. The guests watched silently, their earlier cruelty burning in their hearts. Some approached the mother, whispering apologies. Others simply stood still, unable to meet her eyes. The shame of their mockery weighed heavily on them. But the millionaire ignored them all. His world had narrowed to two figures, the girl and her mother. At last he raised his glass once more. His voice carried not arrogance but conviction, echoing against the vaulted ceilings. "This girl reminded me tonight that music cannot be bought, only inherited through the soul. From this moment forward, she is not a servant's daughter. She is the future of this house." The guests raised their glasses in hesitant agreement. The toast was unlike the hollow ones they had made earlier. It was heavy, genuine, filled with respect they had nearly forgotten how to feel. The girl, crumbs still on her lips, looked up at the man. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My father always told me there is a truth hidden in every note. Tonight you heard it." The millionaire smiled through his tears. "And I will never forget it again." The great hall, which only hours earlier had been filled with empty laughter and shallow toasts, now pulsed with a different energy. It was as though the walls themselves had listened to the music and been changed by it. The chandeliers glowed softer, the silence of the guests heavier, more respectful. For the first time, the mansion felt less like a monument to wealth and more like a temple of truth. The girl, seated at the long table with food spread before her, ate quietly. Each bite carried the taste of survival, of victory, of a dignity reclaimed. Her mother sat beside her, hands trembling, still trying to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. Every so often, she glanced at her daughter with awe, as if she were seeing her for the first time. The millionaire, seated across from them, watched intently. His eyes, once sharp with arrogance, now softened with something unfamiliar, humility. He had spent a lifetime gathering possessions, conquering rivals, and flaunting his riches. Yet nothing had pierced him the way this girl's music had. For the first time in years he felt small, and in that smallness he felt whole. He raised his glass again, but this time not for show. His voice trembled with sincerity. Tonight was meant to be a celebration of wealth and influence. Instead, it has become a lesson. This child reminded me that music is not performance, it is inheritance. It cannot be bought or faked. It is truth, passed through blood and soul. And I intend to honor that truth for as long as I live. The guests murmured in agreement, though many could not meet the girl's eyes. Shame still lingered in them for having mocked what they could not see. But the girl in her innocence bore them no grudge. Her gaze remained calm, her small hands folded politely, as though her music had already forgiven them. The millionaire turned to the mother. His expression was solemn, his words deliberate. "Your husband gave me music. Tonight your daughter returned it. From this day forward you will want for nothing. You will have a home, security, and a place where her talent can flourish. This house is no longer mine alone, it belongs to you as well." The mother's tears flowed freely. She tried to kneel in gratitude, but the millionaire stopped her, lifting her back to her feet with surprising gentleness. "Don't thank me," he whispered. "This is not charity. This is destiny. Music has bound us together." The girl, having finished her meal, turned to the piano once more. Without a word she climbed onto the bench. The guests instinctively hushed, sensing something sacred was about to unfold again. Her small fingers touched the keys, not with the desperation of hunger this time, but with the calm joy of someone finally heard. This time the melody was lighter, brighter. It danced through the hall like sunlight after a storm, a song of hope and renewal. The guests who had once scoffed now sat with heads bowed as though in prayer. Some wept silently. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash away their shame. The millionaire listened with his heart pounding, every note carving deeper into him. He realized that wealth had never brought him peace. It was this, a child playing not for fame, not for applause, but for truth, that gave him purpose. He glanced at the girl's mother, who stood with tears shining on her cheeks, and knew his promise must be more than words. When the music ended, silence reigned once again. But this silence was not heavy with mockery. It was reverent, alive with awe. The girl looked up, and for the first time that night she smiled, a small, fragile smile, but one that lit the hall brighter than all the chandeliers combined. The millionaire stood, placing a hand over his chest. This child is no longer the daughter of poverty. She is the heir of a legacy that will not die. From today forward, she carries not only her father's music but also my name, my protection, and my love. She is family. The room erupted into applause, real applause this time, untainted by arrogance or cruelty. It echoed through the marble halls, spilling out into the night air. But to the girl the applause meant little. What mattered was that her hunger had led her here, to this moment where her father's promise had come true. Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace, whispering into her ear, "He would be proud of you. More than proud. Tonight he is with you." The girl nodded softly, her face pressed against her mother's shoulder. She did not need to answer. Her music had already spoken for her. As the night drew to a close, the guests departed in silence, humbled, changed. No one spoke of politics or business anymore. They spoke only of the girl, of the piano, of the truth they had witnessed. Many knew they would never forget it. The mansion, once just a stage for power, became something else that night. It became a home where music and memory intertwined. It became the place where a hungry child knocked on destiny's door and was welcomed inside. And in the quiet that followed, the millionaire sat near the piano, watching as the girl fell asleep with her head on her mother's lap. He whispered to himself, "Music is not bought. It is inherited. And tonight it was returned to me." For the first time in his life he felt not rich but blessed.